Well, about to look at a player's watch. We're about halfway through 2023, and you know what that means. It means it's time for. Hold on, I got a text message coming through. I'm trying to record. What y'all players doing? Hold up. Okay, it says 2023 has been crap. Don't make us sit through 25 terrible albums. Well, lucky for you, players. I'm not gonna make you sit through 25 terrible albums. I'm going to make you sit through 25 pretty good albums. Yes, I had to comb through 95 albums. See what I do with y'all? 95 albums, but in that I have found 25 albums worthy of praise. Today on the Soul and Stereo Sessions, we're going to talk about the 25 best albums of 2023 so far. What up, players? Thank you once again for joining me for another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions here with your boy. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And I'm not going to hold you up too much with a long, drawn-out intro because we got a lot of music to talk about. But first, before we get to talking, let's get down to some business. First, if you haven't already, just ease your way on down the road and click that like button. Just takes a second, players. It really does take a second. And then hit the subscribe button. And if you haven't already, trust me, there are lots of folks, according to my algorithms, who are watching this video right now, you know who you are, who haven't hit subscribe. So just go ahead and hit subscribe. You'll get notified if there are more videos to come. And more importantly, it'll show the channel some love. It will continue to grow. That'll motivate me to make some more videos for y'all. I'm probably getting in trouble with the stats, but hey, that's what we live for. My pain. And speaking of pain, yes, 2023 has been one of the most uneventful years so far. But we're not going to dwell in negativity. We're going to talk about the albums that were actually pretty good. And if you dig deep enough, there were some solid albums this year. Now, most of the albums from artists that I love came off a little okay. There are a lot of albums from artists that had a lot of buzz that came off There are albums from people that the industry has been gassing forever. The albums went, But beyond that, if you look a little harder, you go deep into the rap underground, you go to some unexplored spaces of R&B, you're going to find some albums that were actually really, really solid. And those are the ones we're going to talk about here today. Many of these names will probably be new to some of y'all, but don't worry, trust your boy, trust me on this, because I don't give you any garbage. So if these names are new, take a second, check them out, see if there's something you'll enjoy, because trust me, if I got them on this list, that means they have something to offer. So let's update those playlists that you have, player. We're going to get into 25 albums in 2023 that you need to have in your ears. Oh, and before we get started, just one thing to keep in mind. This is not a ranked list. So no, we're not putting them in any order. Don't worry about that. We're going to do that in December. So you can yell at me about your favorite being at number 4 instead of number 2 or whatever you like to get into. So today we're just going to celebrate them. No ranks, no lists. In that sense, we're just going to talk about the music. Producer D Roth, let's get this party started, player. Let's get this list rolling. Alright, first up on the list, we got my boy Raheem DeVaughn. He's joined by the Colleagues and Vandell Andrews, who is a saxophonist for this new collection called Love Euphoria. Now, if you're new or if you're not new, you probably know that my man Raheem is one of the cornerstones of R&B in the past few years. When everyone else has seemingly abandoned the genre, Raheem, this brother's putting out 3 or 4 albums a year. He does not stop working. He does not stop touring. And this does not change here with Love Euphoria. This album is very, very short and concise, and there's a lot of instrumentals at play, thanks to Vandale and his saxophone techniques and expertise. And then the production by the colleagues makes this very much a seductive tone, which is perfect for Raheem. And it's very short, very tight, and it's an album that doesn't take long to get into, in and out of, but it's one that always stuck with me ever since I heard it. Raheem has another project this year that I thought was pretty okay, but this one just trumps it, because whereas that project is, you know, the Raheem we know, this one is a different spin on it because it's so atmospheric. It's so much emphasis put on instrumentation, and he can do his Lover Man thing, and it just sounds a beautiful package all put together. This is one that I'm sure will slide under most radars, as most albums on this list will, but I'm always proud of Raheem and crew for keeping R&B as alive as they can in 2023. Next up is Kaytranada and Amine Kaytramine. This title just trips me up. It's one of those ones that looks cool on paper, but you gotta say it. Kaytranime? Look, Kaytranada we know, Amine we know, so we can just get to the actual music. Kaytranada is one of the more underrated producers that have been putting in work for the past decade. A lot of some of your favorite R&B joints were produced by this brother, and y'all just missed out on it. Amine have always been kind of hot or cold on, because he's an artist that sometimes is kind of dope to me, and then sometimes, I'm not buying what you're selling so much. But in this album, I think it works because Kaytranada gives Amine the focus that a lot of some of those other projects didn't have. And it's a very fun summertime record. No, don't go into this looking for lyrical acumen. No, don't go into this looking for some sort of deep messages. No, this is just fun, goofy summertime music with dudes just hanging out at the pool, lusting after women, chasing people around. But the production is just so well done that it's just very fun. For those who say your boy does not like having fun with his music, Kaytranada and Amine, they prove you wrong. This is a very fun record that's really an album that really feels like a moment in time, and not in a bad way. It feels like a summer record that you have fun with in the summer. If you need that for your little pool parties, if you need that to throw on while you're riding out, this is the album for you. A lot of fun. Next up is Sky Zoo, Mind of a Saint, and man, I love this album so much because it's so brilliant. So, for those who don't know and aren't familiar, this album is essentially a concept project that's based on Franklin Saint from the FX show Snowfall, one of my favorite shows of the moment. It just ended. If you missed it, make sure you go check it out. It starts slow. The first couple seasons, I was like, when does it get good? But it gets good. It absolutely gets good. So hang with it. I'm not sure about people saying it's better than The Wire. I think you might be taking some of that stuff that Franklin is selling. It ain't that good, but it's a good thing. But enough about A Wire and enough about Snowfall. Let's talk about Sky Zoo, one of the most underrated MCs in the past 20 years, in my opinion. He's absolutely knocks it out of the park each and every time. And even though he doesn't have the mainstream hits, whenever he drops a project, you know it's going to be solid. Always ends up on one of my year-end lists, and this is no exception. And it's because of how well crafted this is. He steps into the mind of a saint, in this case, main character Franklin Saint, and tells his story. So Franklin starts out as a guy building a business and becomes this criminal empire, and we watch him just self-destruct with each season. And he tells those stories so well. From the guy, you knew if you followed the show, you knew we were going to get a song titled Brick by Brick, because that's his most infamous quote. And then we see him just go back and even flesh out some storylines. Like, we see him just get some closure to some relationships that he had in the past that we kind of saw on the show. But I feel like the album does a better job of closing those chapters than we even saw on the show. Sky Zoo really needs to get props for just being a master storyteller and for knowing the source craft so well. If you're a fan of Snowfall And if you're a fan of storytelling and hip hop, you got to get this album. One of my favorites of the year. I know we're not doing rankings, but one of my favorites of the year. Next up is Colella and Raven. So Colella came out a few years ago, about 5 years ago. She was a favorite of my wife, and I checked her out, and I was like, man, I really liked her approach to the alt R&B movement. I know alt R&B is a sticky place for some people, but when it's done well, it's done well. And I liked that she was able to take sounds of R&B and pop and a little bit of hip hop and a little bit of rock and just like squish all these elements together and to really make her own sound. I love Take Me Apart. I thought her album was great, and it took forever for us to get a follow-up. Raven is that follow-up, and it's just as, if you can tell by that cool album cover, it's just as mysterious and dark and ethereal and everything that you would expect from an artist that's always as elusive as Colella can be. But if you check it out, there's just so much depth here. If you were a fan of some of the up-tempo dance album cuts that came from the most recent Beyonce album, there's a little bit of elements of that here. If you like more of the R&B tone, there's some stuff here. It's really a grab bag of sounds, but it all comes together in one package. And Colella tells her story of basically what she's been doing in these 5 years when she's been gone. She's talking about womanhood. She's talking about sexuality. She's talking about all these moments in time, but she does it in such an impressive package. It's not a necessarily easy album to listen to. You're not going to throw it on and just ride out like K-Tronada and them. But if you really like experimental R&B, experimental pop, and music that pushes the genres, my girl's going to do that for you. Next up is Hit Boy, Surf or Drown. Hit Boy, of course, probably one of the hottest, if not the hottest, producer in the game today. And he's so hot, he's on another album on this list that we'll get to later on. But not only he may be known as the guy that's the steering force behind Nas and his King's Disease series, but don't get it twisted. He was here long before then, and as an artist as well. Hit Boy does spit a little bit, as we saw on those Nas projects, and this is his opportunity to do so. Although it's not a total solo project, I mean it is, but he definitely and wisely brings in some of his A-list friends to kind of get some love behind him. So you got the Nas's and the Dom Kennedys coming through to kind of help out as he tells his story. So he doesn't have to carry the load himself. But it's Hit Boy, so you know the beats are hard. And it reminds me of those albums from the 90s that are kind of those compilation albums a little bit. Those DJ Clue type albums or those funk flexes, those albums where you get all these different personalities on one record, and it's just fun. I know we got DJ Khaled who does that today, but we talking about good ones. We ain't talking about that. This album does it well, but it's absolutely Hit Boy's show. He can tell his story, and he's got lots of friends that back him up. Good album, and one that should be on your radar. Next up is Jessie Ware. That feels good. I don't know why. She has that random exclamation points in the title. But I like this album so much. It's a fun album. Jessie is another of those artists that just does not get enough love from me. She's been doing the thing forever. And she'll pop up. She'll have her fan base. It'll get a little bit of attention. But it just never gets the props that I feel like it deserves. This in this new era in 2023 where we always want to we all want to hit the discotheque now. Everybody's in the disco. This album does it, and it does it well, and it does it better than some of these other albums y'all be hyping up that have disco themes. I won't say any names because I want to keep my DMs clear. But this album is just so much fun because she just lets herself go. It's fun. It's exciting. She pops on different themes and there are different waves to the production, so everything doesn't sound the same. And best of all, it's well written. some of those other albums that I mentioned kind of stumbled because the writing got kind of clunky in my opinion. It got a little too hip-hoppy and it doesn't flow as well in a disco setting. But Jessie doesn't fall into that trap. She knows how to produce the music that fits the tone of the production much better. And she actually, if you're missing the straight up R&B, she got some of that too. So honestly, my favorite songs on the album are the more slowed down R&B joints. A very, very fun record. That feels good. That you should also check out. Chill with exclamation points. Next up is Jay Ski's Abolished Uncertainties. Sometimes, you know, you gotta listen to your fam. A lot of times y'all will hit me up and be like, oh, you gotta check out this album here. You gotta check it out. It's so dope. And I'll check it out and be like, it ain't dope. Sorry, it ain't dope. Oh, you gotta check out this new vocalist. Oh, she killing it. She killing it. She about to be next up. Sound like everybody else to me, player. I'm sorry. But this is a chance where someone put me on to Jay, and even though I was familiar with Jay from some stuff a little bit earlier on, I thought he was cool. I didn't, just being honest, because I'm the honest dude, I didn't think he was trash at all, but I thought he was alright. But this album, I was like, where has this brother been? It's like the switch flipped, and we got a different level of MC, and I love it. Abolished Uncertainties is another one of the better albums of the year for me, even though I ain't ranking them, because you can really see the growth in Jay. There's a song called Burner Phone on this album. And one of my favorite songs of all time is Nas's I Gave You Power. It is a story told from the perspective of a gun, and it is so well done. This song is a perspective of a burner cell phone. And it is almost to the level of that very classic track. I think this song is incredible. And that's just one of many on this album where Jay just takes his MCing to another level. I think that this album shows that this brother is on the verge of some good stuff. And even though he's surrounded by a lot of great MCs around him, of course, you got kind of the Griselda folks that are kind of like in his corner and helping him out and doing the things. He holds his own every single time. This album, y'all, I don't know. I think Jay could be on to some bigger things, so hop on the bandwagon before you get left behind. Abolish Uncertainties. I'm certain that this album is going to be a contender when we start doing Album of the Year rankings pretty soon. Next up is Rory, I Thought It'd Be Different. I thought this album would be different. So Rory, of course, has his background in radio, and he's one of these hip-hop podcast dudes. And no shade to anybody getting that money. But if you follow me, I'm not the biggest fan of some of these brothers because it always comes off like a grift. I do this journalism thing in real life. Y'all can't see it, the degree is right there. So to me, I have a very kind of strict way that when it comes to interviews and the way we interact, there's like a professionalism and I don't like when we do interviews with artists just to drag out drama and just to get gossip and it really annoys me. So that's why I often have like this disdain for more of the hip hop podcast / y'all know who I'm trying not to use names. I'm trying not to get in trouble. Every time I use names, I get in trouble. But my point is there are a lot of people out here who get a lot of attention for their interview skills, but they're not really interviewing. They're just causing trouble. Listen, Rory does his thing, and I have no beef with him, but when I heard that he was attached to this project, my skepticism already flipped because I'm like, oh, what is this? How wrong I was, because this is a great compilation of lots of R&B and hip-hop artists. I mentioned earlier about those old school DJ Clue tapes and Funkmaster Flex records and DJ K Slay albums. A lot of those are right there behind me. This harkens back to that. Rory does a great job of not only just putting the hit makers on his album, he puts a lot of more underdeveloped and lesser known artists who are great but haven't gotten the exposure of many of their peers. This is an opportunity for them to shine, and some really great stuff here. So if you're a little hesitant because of the source, the name that's on the front of it, as I was, admittedly so, get over that, because this is a good product that does hip-hop and R&B very well. Shout out to Rory. I gotta give props when it deserved. This album is a lot better, and it has much better intentions than I thought in the past. So if more people use their platforms to put on artists who deserve the spotlight, I'm all for it. So shout out to Rory for that. You're done good, player. Next up is another name you're probably not familiar with, but maybe you are. Full Crate, a kid from Yerevan. So Full Crate, again, is not a name that's probably high on your recognition radar, but he's done a lot of productions for artists like Eric Roberson and a few others, and he is a really great R&B producer. This is his opportunity, like some of the other artists we've talked about on this list already, to give some shine to some different artists, as well as showcasing his talents to a newer, wider audience. And it works very well, because he's able to take the tools and expertise he's used to craft some of these neo-soul hits that have kind of gone on the radar, and use it to tell his own story about living and growing up in Yerevan and coming over to the States as kind of an immigrant and moving around a lot, and using those sensibilities to make a very soulful, just warm feeling album. This is one of those joints that your grandma put on a Saturday afternoon while you're cleaning. This is one of those type albums. It's just very healing to the soul. So if you're missing one of those albums that you need to just kick on a Saturday afternoon and kick back, this is your kickback album. And Full Crate, I really like what he's doing with his production. I think he's moving forward, and he's moving R&B forward in spaces where Lord knows we need a lot of help. But he's taking the elements of the past and putting a fresh spin on them in new spaces. Man, I love to see when people are keeping a genre alive, and Full Crate is one of those doing that. Next up is L. Michael's Affair, and of course, the one and only Black Thought, Glorious Game. It's funny because I remember when there was a time I thought we'd never get a Black Thought solo album. I thought that he would just be forever tied to the roots, and I always wondered if that would hurt his legacy, because he was just always in this group setting. Now it feels like we get a Black Thought solo project like twice a year. I'm cool with it. I'm not complaining. Don't get me twisted. But it is funny to see the evolution of this sound, and this is more of what you'd expect. So L. Michael's Affair lays the groundwork, and my boy Thought just goes Thought all over us. There's a lot of storytelling that comes from his Philly upbringing in this album, and that he gets very real. He talks about almost losing his drive. He talks about the things that he saw in his neighborhood, but he does it in that lyrical way that only he can. I know that there are lots of lists that's like the best MCs of all time, the greatest rappers of all time, the this and that. And sometimes you have to separate those out, because if you make a list of the best lyricists of all time, just lyricists, and Black Thought ain't in your top like 3, maybe 2, I'm going to have to question that list, because when it comes to lyricism, just the art of lyricism, few can put it down like Thought. And these solo projects, including Glorious Game, shows that he has not slowed down in the decades he's been in this game. It's glorious, that's why. Next up is Static Selector Round Trip. Another compilation album. I feel like we got a bunch of those on this list. And Static Selector, he's another artist that seems to put out albums pretty regularly, and they're almost always very good. There's something about Round Trip. I don't know if it's just because the playing field is so barren this year, or if it's because he's got some A-listers that just go bananas on this thing. I mean, he has basically old Wu-Tang up there. Or what, or it's just like the perfect storm of greatness. But this Round Trip album may be his if not the best, up there with one of his best projects to date. It's just so good. If you love those rap compilation albums that we've been talking about, this is the album for you, because you've got so many weird combinations of MCs slapped together doing their thing. You've got familiar faces. I talked about the Woo, and you've got like Conway, the Machine, and lots of other folks that you're used to seeing wreck shop, and they absolutely wreck shop. And he, of course, Static is one of the better producers in the game right now, so you're going to get some dope beats regardless. I really thought that this one was a surprise of the year, not because I doubted it, because his albums are always great, but the level of greatness really, really surprised me. If you're a fan of those compilations, this one definitely has to be on your radar. Next up is Cali Uchis, Red Moon in Venus. Also one of my favorite album covers because it's like some weird anime stuff. It's like she's got like the carnage symbiote coming all about her. It's cool. And it's cool because you never know what you're going to get with a Cali Release. She's an artist that jumps all over when it comes to Afrobeats, pop, R&B. Like, she does some of everything. And this is another album that does a little bit of everything. But of all the albums that I remember from her, this one feels the most rooted in R&B. And in a year where we've got such sparse R&B offerings, I really like that. That's dope. We need this album. As always, she does not hold back in just experimenting and playing with her sound. But the writing is also some of the strongest we've seen so far from her. She's got some incredible singles. Moonlight, one of my favorite songs of the year. She's got so much energy and just passion in everything she does. But she's also able to just lean on that writing. That's the key, y'all. And a song is well written. It just adds so much to the production. And that combo makes for an absolutely well done release. You got a bunch of those back to back to back. You got a banger on your hands. This is probably my favorite Cali album to date, and another one of the better albums of the year, even though we ain't ranking them yet. Next up is Mac Ayres, Comfortable Enough. So I went in this album expecting some lighthearted, fun R&B. That's a lot of times that's what you get with Mac. Sometimes he switches it up. But I was surprised at how deep he got in this album. This album is really, even though it's called Comfortable Enough, it's really an exploration for those of us who battle insecurities, who are trying to just find comfort in ourselves. And if you even check out the title tracks, the titles of the tracks, that alone spells out a story. And it's very interesting how instead of just kind of fun, yay, we're gonna have fun up at the function type music that I know Mac for, this one's a lot more, it has a lot more to say in a good way. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews to this album. A lot of people were kind of put off by some of the latent heaviness of it, but I think it's needed. I'm never mad at an album that's or an artist that's willing to push the boundaries and talk about some things going on when it turns to mental health and just emotions and everything else, because music is about expression, and that's the expression that he wanted to portray. So if you like Mac because you like his fun stuff, his energy, those albums you can just come on and throw on in the background when your boys and your girls and your friends come over for a nice little function at the house, this might not be the album for that, although there are definitely some songs that will fit into that. This more, to me, is an album that you play for some self-introspection and to feel more about yourself and to get you thinking about yourself. I think that it's very well done, though. And kudos to Mac for putting out a project that actually makes us think, because we need more of that in 2023. Next up on the list are our boys and girls from Dreamville with the Creed 3 soundtrack. I know this movie, due to recent events, has a little weird aura around it today, but let's not get into any of that. We're going to stick it to the music, because I am all for a good old-fashioned soundtrack. If you were from the 90s like your boy, you remember the days of the soundtrack, and the anticipation for soundtracks were stronger than some movies. Like, we were more hyped for the soundtrack than the movie. Shout out to Have Plenty. Shout out to New Jersey Drive. It's cool. We had dope soundtracks though. So it's cool to get back to an era where we have these soundtracks that just accentuate what goes on with the hype around the film by giving us some great music. And that's what happens with the Dreamville soundtrack. It's very much a throwback to that era. And I know that a lot of people have given a lot of hype and props to J. Cole for his Adonis interlude, which is a good song, but it's like a half a minute or something. It's just short. There's way more here than that. And that's why we've got artists like Ari Lennox and Sid and Sir and Earth Gang, one of my favorite songs on the album, who really just present what they do to a larger audience. And as we've been talking earlier about all these compilations on this album, it's cool to get different sounds. So you're going to get Ari doing her thing, Earth Gang doing their crazy thing, Sid being Sid. You're going to get all these artists doing things that are very much in their wheelhouse, and it comes together for a very interesting and fun package. We need more soundtracks like this. I'm all for it. I know we got the soundtrack for the Spider-Verse, and that actually was okay. Not okay enough to make this list, but it was okay. So I am all for this new revolution of getting back to soundtracks for movies. Let's get it in, because you know me. I'm all about turning the clock back. Next up is Black Odyssey, Diamonds and Freaks. And like a lot of artists on this list that we've talked about already, it's kind of hard to put Black Odyssey into like a box. Like it's sometimes R&B, sometimes it's hip hop, sometimes it's like, I don't know what to call it, but it's really good is what it is. Pretty much you can describe this album as, can I say this on YouTube? Like audio erotica? It's an album that explores sexuality for sure, but it does it in a way that is not crass and ridiculous and goofy and dumb like a lot of modern day R&B. Let me adjust in my seat before I get on one of my tangents. It's a look at sexuality, especially from a black lens, and I love the way it's portrayed because it's done in a way that knocks out boundaries. Kind of like sexuality in 2023 today. Like it's not going to be in one specific box. It's going to be a little bit of hip hop. It's going to be a little bit of R&B. It's going to be a lot of storytelling. I mean, this brother got everybody from Bootsy Collins to Rhapsody on this joint. But it all works and it all comes together for a greater package. Again, this is another album that kind of hit me in left field. I was not expecting it, but I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Specifically, I was impressed at how well crafted it was and how he used his creativity to push it forward. Sometimes you gotta get outside your box, y'all, because there's some good stuff out there. Next up is Lloyd Banks, The Course of the Inevitable, Part 3, Pieces of My Pain. So Lloyd has been dropping these Course of the Inevitable projects for a couple years now, and they're all pretty solid. Usually they I think they get a little bit better with each one. Lloyd's issue as an MC, I've said this all the way back in the G-Unit days, was that he's great, but sometimes his delivery just doesn't do it for me. It gets kind of like mush-mouthy. So you kind of lose kind of like his intent, even though the bars are strong. And he gets around that in this project because he just has so much to say. These projects are very heartfelt and emotional, and you can see a lot of growth in Lloyd, not only as an MC, but as a man, as a father, and those shine through. So it helps with the storytelling aspect. It's not just street dude talking G-Unit stuff and he's kind of tripping over his words. He is absolutely telling a story here. And although I can see some people pushing back and saying, oh, it's just the same old Lloyd Banks just saying the same old, same old. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Because the Lloyd Banks of 2023 is far from the Lloyd Banks of 2003. And you can see that growth within the music. Solid production. You never have to worry about the bars with Lloyd. They're always there. But the production's a little bit better than we've seen in other projects as well. This makes this, of the three so far, one of the stronger offerings and one that you should definitely check out, especially if you're one of those G-Unit fans looking for a relapse. Next up is Kiana, Lede, and Grudges. So Kiana is one of these R&B artists. Honestly, most R&B artists today kind of focus on one thing, with a few exceptions. Raheem doesn't do it. My boy Kevin Ross, he doesn't do it. But most of the high-profile R&B artists, they all focus on the same old thing, being toxic and mad. And Kiana is no different. She's toxic and mad. But the thing that sets her apart from her peers, whose music sounds like a bunch of rants on Instagram instead of actual, lyrics set to harmonies and production, she knows how to write a good song. Her songs are well written. Her concepts are solid. So even though, yes, she's talking about the same thing that R&B has kind of been exploring lately, which is heartbreak on heartbreak on heartbreak and sex on sex on sex, she does it from a way that seems a lot more personal and not so much confrontational. It's almost a difference of being, hey, I'm going to tell you why I'm mad versus I'm just going to scream at your face. And I like the former because you get to know more about the artist and the person, and the music becomes more relatable. Plus, she's got some dope songs that have made their way on my playlist, so I can't discount it for that. In a year with not a lot of R&B offerings, I think Kiana is one of the ones to watch because, man, when it comes to R&B, we got to get the good ones while we can. We got to hoard them things up. It's hard out here for a play. Up next is Masego with his self-titled album. Masego, we talked a little bit earlier about Colella and alt R&B, and Masego is another artist like Cali, like Colella, that just, there is no box. Like, you don't know what you get. You might be singing about yams one minute and something else the next. And I like that. I like that we don't know what we're going to get. And Masego is just another one of these artists who have taken a lot of risk in his music, and it's paying off. This self-titled just shows that change can be good, and he's embracing different elements of different genres as he explores his journey in music. And the music is what really puts it together. I really love the instrumentation on this album. The production is very strong, and even when the songs are just like okay to me, it's the instrumentation that pulls me in and keeps me listening to the next one. As an overall project, it's extremely solid. Probably one of the more solid from front to back albums of 2023 so far. If you're a fan of him, this is a must. And if you haven't checked out his music outside of the more viral singles, this is probably the album to do that. It reminds me of Steve Lacy last year, where a lot of people might have known a song or two, but I feel like this is a project that could get you to know more about Masego, the artist himself. So check it out. You might have a new fan, Masego, when you hear these folks getting on this album. If you're kind of like on the fence about checking them out, this might be the one to kind of dive in. Next up is Conway the Machine, Won't He Do It? Look, player, we talked about this before. If Conway, if Westside Gunn, if Benny, if they're putting out an album in a year, most likely that album will end up on one of my best of lists. These brothers just crank out music and they rarely miss. And this is another hit from Conway. Conway's in a great space right now as an artist because he realizes that he can't be put in a box. Like, he doesn't want to be put in a box of one sound. And I think that was happening earlier on in his career. But I think, like Benny, he's understanding and like, hey, I got to branch out a little bit because I'm a versatile artist. So let me get versatile on these beats. Let me get some different types of beats. Let me flex on these. And that's what Won't He Do It does. It's not just the Griselda stuff that we heard 3 or 4 years ago. This is a chance for him to flex on a different playing field, but he does it so well. His confidence, y'all know the machine. Like, the dude is the most confident. You cannot tell him he's not the greatest MC of all time because that's the confidence he has in every bar. He has such a commanding presence. And I was just talking on Threads, the new thing that everybody loves, that the thing that I'm really missing from hip-hop today is like artists just don't have a presence. Everyone sounds the same. Everyone kind of just, hey, rapping in the chest. Like, there's not the energy there. No one steps on the stage like a Busta Rhymes or a DMX and they just command the track or anything. If there are other featured artists, you forget about them because they come in and just take over. Everybody sounds the same. Nobody sounds like Conway. Conway is the dude that just takes over every bar that comes in. So when Conway takes over here and won't he do it, that's what he does. He commands the scene, but he does it with different production, different types of flexes, and he just will not slow down. I love that we're getting a new and improved machine, showing that machines can be tinkered and improved here along the way, but it's the same old Conway we love from day one. Another one of the better albums of the year, and I'm looking forward to see where that ranks on my year-end list. Next up is October London, The Rebirth of Marvin. One of the more controversial albums on this list. And I'll tell you why. So, October London album is a tribute to, of course, according to the name, Marvin Gaye. But if you listen to it, dude sounds exactly like Marvin Gaye. So then the debate comes, is this a tribute or is this cosplay? Because I can understand if it's the latter, people being like, hold up now, dude. Like, you can't straight copy somebody. But to me, I lean in the former. I do think that this at heart is a tribute album. And yeah, he does sound just like him. It's kind of creepy. And not just him. He like does like a Barry White thing later. I'm like, is this dude AI? Dude is crazy. But I like that he's able to take those elements of classic soul and bring them into today. To me, I like the mentality behind it, and I know it's a bit weird for some artists. Look, if someone came out today and they were doing a Keith Sweat impression, I would probably be like, what is this? But even though I don't have those type of negative feelings for this album, I can't really hate it on anybody who does. What I will say is give it a chance. Don't listen to it so much as, oh, this is just cosplay. I think this is a tribute, and in this tribute, October is introducing this sound to a newer, younger audience, basically building upon the legendary status of one of the greatest of all time. He's taking those sounds, he's taking those notes, he's taking those vocals, he's taking those stylings, and he's bringing them in 2023, and he's doing it in a way that, to me, pays homage. So, again, I know people argue about whether this album goes too far with the homages or not. That's a personal decision you take on your own. But to me, I think the album is very solid. I love what he's doing. I love it as a tribute. And I love that we're getting a different type of R&B. Because my gosh, R&B is more than just the one or two types of song that we hear. R&B ain't just Afro beats, y'all. Give me something new. And he is giving us something new from something old. I'm with it. Next up is Odyssey. To what end? Odyssey, throw him in the same bucket as we talked about with Sky Zoo a little earlier. This dude is like 10 albums deep. Absolutely a veteran of the underground scene. But I bet there are people watching this video right now who consider themselves hip-hop heads, hip-hop historians, writing for websites, probably never heard of Odyssey. What I say to you is, you need to actually do your research, player. This man does his thing and always delivers with strong albums. And once again, we have it here. And Odyssey does not shy away from his journey. He talks about, very specifically, about his insecurities, about his struggles of making it to the next level. And he wonders if he'll get there. And honestly, whether he gets there or not, all I'm happy about is he's continued to give us consistent product every time that continues to push boundaries. If you like lyricism, this is your album. If you like introspection, this is your album. If you like solid production, this is your album. Another winner of hip-hop from the underground scene, because if you're looking at mainstream hip-hop today and it's kind of like, I don't really see what's going on out here, you need to look a little deeper under the ground. And you'll see there's a lot of stuff bubbling. And these brothers been doing it for years. Odyssey's been doing it for years. And 10 years in, 10 albums in, it's been more than 10 years, but 10 albums in, he's still hitting with every one. To What End is definitely one that should be on your list. Next up is Navy Blue, Ways of Knowing. So Navy Blue, I think I had stumbled upon him a few years ago, and there's just something about him. I just loved his style, and I loved his production. He absolutely goes into the more moody type of production, but he does it in a soulful way. It's not just droning or one note flat beats. There's a very soulfulness to his production. So it was very interesting to learn that like this dude is a skater, and he's at this point like a Grammy winning producer. He's a designer. He does a little bit of everything, and the music is the thing that I think he's trying to stick to right now, and I hope he really focuses on that as a solo artist. There's a lot of steam here. And this album, Ways of Knowing, if you can't tell from the album cover, is a tribute to his family. He's talking a lot about the issues within the family, both good and bad, being honest, but he talks about how that shaped him into the brother he is today. And he does it in such a soulful, introspective way, as a lot of the albums on this list that stand out, because when you have a story to tell that's strong, I'm always going to put that above the Kodak Blacks and I ain't talking about hardly nothing, or the trippy reds that you're trying to tell me is so dope, and I'm like, what is this? Like, there's absolutely substance to these bars, and I'm a sucker for soul. When you're able to put those elements into your storytelling, it elevates it to another level. And Navy is getting stronger as an MC as well. You can really see that here. This album is not just a lot of potential. I think he's capitalizing on that potential, and probably his better album, in my opinion, to date. So check this one out if you're a fan, and if you're not familiar with his sound and you're looking for more of that MCing that incorporates soul and incorporates a lot of storytelling. Navy, he got you. So next up is a surprise, and this one is Mahalia IRL. If you are a fan of soulandstereo.com and you saw like the list I did earlier this year that detailed the 25 best albums of the year, like, of course you probably like, oh, he already did this list. Nope, I've got a new one up here because this album dropped after that list was created, so I had a chance to update it. Yes, you get new and fresh on YouTube, and that's what we get with Mahalia. I'm a big fan of Mahalia. She's been around a couple years. I think her last EP, Letter to My Ex, that album, that was an EP, but that one really made me a fan. It went from being like, oh, she's dope, to like, okay, I really like her. That EP did it, so I was looking greatly forward to her debut album. This album is here, and it's wonderful, it's well done. Really like this project because, sort of like Kiana, it's able to go beyond the tropes of current R&B and to move beyond it and to push it in a different way. So yeah, it talks about heartbreak and this and that, but it does so in a more intriguing way. Plus, she knows her 90s and 2000s R&B. If you're a fan of that, I think you'll find a lot here. And it's not just because she samples Soul for Real's Candy Rain. That was a nice surprise. But not only is she incorporating those sounds from the past, she's also incorporating the writing of the past, the concepts of the past. So every song doesn't sound the same. Every song tells a different aspect of a relationship. So it's not just all 18 heartbreak songs or 18 I hate you songs. There are different levels to every relationship, and this album details those steps from front to back. Mahalia, to me, this is arguably one of the better R&B projects of the year. I really hope it doesn't go under the radar, because in a year with such sparse R&B, this is one of the bigger standouts, and I hope that she really gets the shine she deserves, because, oh girl, she needs it. Trust me. I like to put on dope artists, and she's dope. Now, before we finish, we got 2 left, and these 2 are my 2 personal favorites of the year for hip-hop and R&B. Before we get that, I want to make some time for a few honorable mentions. So these are albums that didn't make the 25, but I think are still pretty solid. So check them out. Producer D Roth, roll that beautiful beam footage and show them 5 albums that didn't quite make the list, but you might want to check out anyway. Next up is Killer Mike and Michael. So, a few months ago, I did a list ranking the 50 best hip-hop albums of the 2010s. And I was surprised, because it probably won't surprise anyone watching this video, that list was the person who appeared the most on that list was Kendrick Lamar. But it might surprise you that the person who appeared the second most was Killer Mike. Yes, not only just in the Run the Jewels realm, but also as a solo artist. So quietly, Killer Mike is one of the better artists of the 2010s. Probably just blew your mind. And with this album, Michael, he might be one of the better artists of the 2020s. The man is not playing. So I love this album because, as we know, Killer Mike is very much a veteran of the game, and a lot of his music and a lot of his beliefs, very politically minded. He does not shy away from his beliefs. I won't go into that here or there because we'll be all day with me like picking apart or agreeing or disagreeing. However, the thing that I like about this album is that we get a familial touch. This is more about family than anything. He incorporates lots of gospel because that's his background. He does not shy away about talking about his mother, his grandmother, his family member who's struggling with substance abuse. These are all things that he's putting a face on. He's putting a face on drug abuse and showing that it's like, that crackhead down the street isn't just somebody we laugh at. That's somebody's aunt. So he tells the stories about this from his own personal life, where he's talking about a struggle with a teenage pregnancy. These are things that are being put all together. But of course, it's Killer Mike, so the bars are insane. And the production, the gospel themed production, oh my gosh, it does me so well. Now, I know I've seen some criticisms that it's too preachy. People wanted Run the Jewels. Player, this ain't Run the Jewels. You want Run the Jewels? Wait till Run the Jewels 5 come out. Like, this ain't this. This is something different. So instead of that, you get something that's a more personal journey toward Killer Mike. That's why it's called Michael. This is his story. And in my opinion, probably my favorite hip-hop album of the year so far. Got 6 months. Y'all got to prove me wrong. And finally on our list, my favorite R&B album of the year so far, Musiq Soulchild and Hit Boy, Victims and Villains. There was a lot of, what should I say? I don't know if confusion is the right word, but maybe doubt when we heard that this album was gonna drop. So a lot of Musiq Soulchild fans, of course, miss the neo soul music from 2001, 2002, 2004, that era he dominated. And they only saw Hit Boy as the guy that does beats for Nas. What they miss is Hit Boy has been doing R&B production forever. So I knew that this would be a great pairing, especially considered that Musiq is also a well-beloved hip-hop head himself. Let's just ignore the hustle phase. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't Google. Anyway, when you put together Hit Boy, probably the hottest producer and most reliable right now, with Musiq, such a veteran of the game who, honestly, usually puts out good albums, but I was ready for him to try something new with his sound. You get this, a very abbreviated, it's very short album, but one that I think is very, very good and very true to Musiq's sound, but pushing him into a different direction. Yes, he's got some hip-hop sounding joints, but honestly, my favorite song isn't even a hip-hop joint. It's more of a kind of rock-led song. That title track is incredible to me. And then we do have the more soulful cuts that he's known for. It's a great, great, great package that shows that music can be more than just the dude who was singing on Midnight Love in 2003. I know some fans were disappointed because that's what they wanted. They wanted that classic sound. And he might get back to that. That just wasn't what this album was. Instead, it was a step in another direction with a very hot producer. And it worked to perfection. Right now, it's my favorite R&B album of the year. Where it will land on my list when I start ranking them and I start taking my personal preferences out of it and just break it down, as only your unbiased album reviewer can do. We'll see. But like I said earlier, we got 6 months to be proven wrong. But it's going to be high on that list. Trust and believe. was 25 albums. 25 albums in 2023 that, trust me, are worth your time for checking out. Now, make sure that you head to the comments below. Let me know what you thought of those albums and drop off your thoughts for albums that you thought that maybe I missed. If there's somebody that I missed, put me on in the comments. There's probably some that I didn't know, or maybe I did know, intentionally left it off. Wait till these Yachty fans find this. Nope, I didn't forget him. He just ain't on this list. Anyway, this edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions is a wrap. Play on, players.